It's a muggy March evening in Orlando, Florida. Fans are deep into the card of WrestleMania 24, the show of shows in WWE, the Super Bowl of professional wrestling for decades. A seasoned Shawn Michaels is standing in the corner of the ring, the same Shawn Michaels who threw his tag team partner through a barbershop window to begin his singles career, who lasted 60 minutes in the ring with the great Bret Hart to win his first world championship, who was WWE's first Grand Slam champion, who once posed for Playgirl, and the man who arguably immortalized the Superkick. A vicious maneuver that has every bit as much aesthetic appeal as it does potential to be used out of nowhere. The Heartbreak Kid was famous for pulling it out at the last second to grab a win, but typically as his opponent was struggling to get to their feet, he would stand in the corner and stomp his foot, tuning up the band and signaling to the crowd that his patented sweet chin music, as he called it, was on the way. A finishing maneuver he had been using up to this point for over 16 years. However, on this evening as he went to do so, he hesitates. The cocky young man who has made a name for himself over the years by being ruthless, charismatic, and decisive suddenly can't find it in himself to finish off his opponent. He gently sets his foot down, drops his head, and with a tear in his eye, he looks at the other man in the ring. The man looks back, and reluctantly, Michaels finally pulls the trigger. This was a quiet little moment in the Nature Boy Ric Flair's retirement match. The stipulation going into it was that if Rick lost, he would be forced to retire. Which, of course, the two men knew going into it that this was to be Rick's last match, a proper WrestleMania send-off for a proper legend in the business. As I mention every holiday season when we close out the year with a video comparing pro wrestling to video games in some obscure way, wrestling is fake in the same way that most forms of entertainment are fake. Do these two men actually hate each other? Was a dog collar match really a better way to solve their problems than a simple chat over coffee? No, of course not, but it was hella entertaining and it's hard to fake bumps like this.
Oh my God, God Almighty!
Pro wrestling tells stories in the same way movies and games do. Characters, conflict, resolution. Wrestling, however, is sold as a sport, not a cinematic experience. Meaning most of the communication is non-verbal. So much has to be said between the ropes without a single word being uttered. And I think that's an art form that's largely misunderstood. Do wrestlers have wars of words? Absolutely. Look no further than an old Rock promo or a current day MJF promo, and you'll see that done at its best. However, in-ring storytelling, to me, has always been immensely more moving and universally relatable. Even if you don't know that Shawn Michaels is now being tasked with retiring the man he grew up idolizing and that Flair is begging for a proper send-off, you can feel in this moment from their body language and from Shawn's hesitation that they are both torn because there is no escape from what must happen next. This subtle moment of HBK struggling to put away the Nature Boy says so much without saying anything at all. And this is exactly the sensation I got a while back when fighting Toriel in Undertale for the first time. The longer your encounter with her, the more she becomes reluctant to keep you trapped inside the ruins. As the battle goes, she finds it harder and harder to bring herself to attack you, and I don't say that because there was a cutscene or because dialogue explicitly told me, it was because her actual attacks made that clear. At first, you have to dodge her magic, but as the fight progresses, the attacks become shorter and eventually the magic just starts to go around you. She's missing on purpose. You can just put the controller down and she won't hurt you. She can't bring herself to anymore. Fighting is inherently the backbone of pro wrestling, and I think we know it's inherently part of a ton of games now, for better or for worse. And as someone who is a huge connoisseur of both, today I'd like to have a dog collar match with all of you about what has worked for me in combat storytelling in both mediums, what hasn't, why each hasn't, what games can borrow from wrestling to tell deeper stories, the psychology behind these things, and then we'll end this video on a damn good recent example that kinda ties it all together. Then we'll exchange presents, drink eggnog, and reminisce about holidays past. Or you can throw me into a barbershop window, your choice. This is the RKO. You've probably seen it in meme videos like this before. But if you watch wrestling like me, you'll know this has long been the finishing move of one Randy Orton, a future Hall of Famer. Randy's character over the years has evolved from a stock young babyface to one of the most sadistic and unpredictable stars in the business, known for his vicious offense and betraying those he may be aligned with, whether they be an authority figure, a fellow wrestler, or even his on-screen lover. His unsettling, calculating demeanor paired with his unpredictability has earned him the nickname The Viper. And while that character can certainly be communicated via promo and commentary, the RKO itself is the perfect reflection of this. Much like a snake bite, it's quick, it's unpredictable, and it's devastating. Offense should illustrate the character as much as outfits and dialogue do. Which is one reason I love Octopath Traveler so much. The characters are all extremely fleshed out, especially in battle. Alphen is an aspiring apothecary. He prides himself on healing others and mixing new ingredients to brew up the perfect concoction he needs. You see this in the story, but it's also illustrated on the battlefield with his concoctability that allows you to mix ingredients you've picked up and make something to use in battle. Tressa is constantly looking to collect rare items and haggling with others for some extra dough, and in combat, she will literally pay some dudes to come help out. The Undertaker is, well, the Undertaker. He buries people, so he uses the Tombstone Piledriver, which leaves the opponent unconscious and positioned perfectly for a casket. A little silly, but growing up this added so much to the character. And since people very rarely kicked out of this, it sold the idea that the dead man truly was some sort of unbeatable supernatural force. In Fire Emblem, we're told that Hilda is lazy and unconcerned with war, which is reflected in her authority stat. It's abysmal. She's not fit to lead in the narrative, and that's backed up by her stats. Same goes for the former Opera House performer Dorothea, who based on her stats is arguably the best dancer class unit in the game. When the in-game system or the in-ring system mirrors the character, we buy the message the game or the show is selling. And why is that the case?
Say the line, Bart!
Ludonarrative dissonance.
But I have a psych study about it, and it's interesting, I promise, and I know I'm just really shoehorning in wrestling, but whatever, I'm sorry, I'll just play the damn mysterious music.
In 2019, researchers at UC Santa Cruz conducted a study where they would have subjects play 3 different games in a randomized order. One game was September 12th, which informs you explicitly up front that it is not a game. There is no winning or losing, there is no end because the end has already begun. You have the option to eliminate villains, but at the risk of also harming civilians. When you accidentally take out civilians, their loved ones mourn and turn into villains themselves. Then you decide who to eliminate next, if anyone, until the researchers stop you. The next game is called Limb, where you play as a colorful block in a maze. There is no explicit goal, but there is an end to the maze if you happen to find it. Along your way, you'll find other blocks that will violently push you around and impede your progress, unless your block matches colors with them. You can change your color and blend in to avoid being pushed around, however blending slows you down and zooms the camera way in, restricting your vision. And if you blend too long, the screen will shake and you'll eventually stop. Should you happen to get to the end of the maze, another multicolor block will greet you and the game will end. The last game is called Threes, in which players match number tiles on a grid to shoot for a high score. It's a little abstract puzzle game and plays very similar to 2048. Now, the purpose behind these 3 games being chosen specifically was to explore whether procedural rhetoric, or as we would call it, game mechanics, can accurately convey an argument or stance to players, and if so, under what circumstances. September 12th tested mechanics and dialogue together with its mention of the War on Terror in the instructions. Limb tested mechanics with no dialogue, since it's up to you to decide if the controls, the enemies, and the blending mechanic communicated a larger argument. And Threes was the controls, since there was no larger argument to it. It's just a puzzle, dog. After each game, the subjects would answer a few questions, including, did the game contain an argument? As you'd imagine, Threes was overwhelmingly no, September 12th was overwhelmingly yes, but interestingly, Limb was also majority yes. Granted, it was not as on the nose as September 12th, it did contain an intended argument. And although it wasn't as staggering a yes as September 12th, a strong majority still believed it to contain an argument despite no attached dialogue or narrative. Mechanics matter and communicate more than we really think about. Simply the rules and inner workings of a game, much like the inner workings of a wrestling match or battle system, communicate a ton, even when you remove the context and dialogue. Like, take Final Fantasy VII as an example. Cloud tells the gang that Sephiroth's power is incredible, but we didn't really need him to say that, did we? Because right before this is said, we saw it happen in a flashback. Sephiroth's attacks deal massive quantities of damage that you haven't even seen yet at this point in the game. Meanwhile, Cloud can't even hit the dragon. Oh, and the dragon's attacks do no damage at all to Sephiroth. We understand exactly what's happening here because we understand the mechanics. Kenny Omega's finisher, fittingly called the One-Winged Angel, yes, it is named after Sephiroth, Kenny is a big gaming fan, is one of, if not the strongest finishers in the business. Not because that's what everyone says, but because no one has ever kicked out of it. If he hits this move, he wins, which is unheard of in pro wrestling nowadays. When finishers in wrestling are rarely kicked out of, you'll often hear wrestling nerds say the move is well protected. Because any move that gets kicked out of a lot sort of loses its credibility and breaks the illusion of its power. If it's not winning matches, why should I believe it's really a threat? It'd be like an insanely animated move in a game that doesn't really do much damage, which is why you are probably more scared of this thing than this thing. Another example of this is in Paper Mario. Spoilers for a 16-year-old game, I guess. When the Shadow Queen shows you her true form, you legit can't do any damage to her for like 3 turns, no matter what you try. You experience firsthand that she's really unkillable. Then friendship ex machina and you can finally have a fair fight with her. Alright, counterexample. What if there is a disconnect between the narrative and the battle mechanics? What if the game gives you a little ludonarrative dissonance? Is it really that bad? What if it's early in the game and you are about to fight
the most powerful driver in the Empire and wielder of Bridget, the most powerful blade?
Then you somehow win, and it's not actually all that difficult. And then the game hits you with
Stubborn child. Why don't you just give it up?
It leaves you with questions like, wait, I thought I was winning. Were they really that strong? Am I really that strong? Should this be so jarring? Why are there monsters in the wild stronger than them? Did Daryl really pull this example from an old donkey vid? Guess we'll never know. See, this is one thing that plagues a lot of games. The battles don't always support the narrative, at least without the use of cutscenes. Remember how the narrative used to always hype up legendary Pokemon as literally being able to move heaven and earth, but then once you find them, their level is conveniently like around the same level as your best Pokemon? Then of course it's like 10 or 15 levels lower than the Elite Forest Pokemon. And I get why from a game design perspective this is, but it does take away from the believability just a bit. Like, as much as I absolutely adored Ghost of Tsushima top to bottom, there were some fights in there that were pretty emotionally driven where maybe that person didn't really want to be fighting Jin. I would have loved attacks where maybe they hesitate or show some reluctance and you have the option to get in a free shot or don't, kind of like we saw with Toriel or with Shawn Michaels. Instead, they just come across as another difficult enemy and further the story all through cutscene and mid-fight dialogue. I think you get my point. If a game tells you something, it should tell you that thing in all aspects: cinematics, dialogue, and battle mechanics. But let's put a bow on this video by talking about what I kinda consider the peak of the mountain when it comes to storytelling through combat. Let me tell you about a cloudy evening in Jacksonville, Florida on November 7th, 2020. Let me tell you the story of the Young Bucks versus FTR. Tag team wrestling is a beautiful thing. Teams like the Road Warriors, the Hart Foundation, and the Hardy Boys, just to name a few, laid the foundation for a format of wrestling that is entirely different from the one-on-one competition people typically come to expect from combat sports. It's fun, it's fast, it's hard-hitting, and yet in the hands of another pair of teams, it might be careful, calculated, strategic. Teams can win by unleashing a flurry of high-octane two-man offense, or by simply grinding away at one of the members of the other team by cutting the ring in half and keeping them from ever getting a tag. And in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, tag team wrestling in WWE was incredible. However, as the 2000s drew to a close and the 2010s began, pure tag team wrestling felt sort of like a dying breed. WWE for some seemed to be focusing more on individual feuds and only held tag matches as sort of a tool to promote larger narratives or to get more stars in the ring at once. However, one tag team not on a WWE roster was keeping the tag team scene relevant, and this was none other than the Young Bucks. Matt and Nick Jackson were two young men devoted to becoming the best tag team in the world, which if you look at their resume, it's hard to argue they didn't do exactly that. With their high-flying, fast-paced, flashy offense, they dominated several promotions including PWG, New Japan, and Impact, and would even go on to become VPs of All Elite Wrestling, a promotion with a flourishing tag team scene, where notably, they have not yet won the tag titles. However, as the Bucks were making a name for themselves, WWE's new brand NXT was doing their part to revive tag team wrestling with teams like War Raiders, DIY, and The Revival, a team named after their own fighting philosophy that harkened back to the classic tag team wrestling style of the 1980s, echoing movesets of the Brainbusters and other 80s teams. They aimed to revive a more traditional, in-ring, mat-based, no flips, just fists approach to winning matches. And much like the Bucks, they were successful on screen and with wrestling fanatics. Both teams critic darlings, but separated by promotions. A dream match if there ever was one, but wasn't going to happen. Until this year.
Another truck pulling up to Daly's place. Hey, wait a minute. Wait just a minute. Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler, FTR!
Frustrated with WWE creative, the Revival found their way to AEW, now going by FTR. And immediately they confronted the Bucks. Fast forward a few months, FTR has won the tag titles and risen to the top of their rivals' promotion. Meanwhile, the Bucks have been struggling to find themselves after a falling out with Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page. But now they find themselves going head-to-head with their dream opponents. Title on the line, pay-per-view, fans in masks, no more putting this off. This is finally happening. The best of WWE versus the best of the indies. Who is really the world's best tag team? Well, turns out they're both pretty good. This was a 29-minute masterclass in in-ring psychology. We saw flashes of the Bucks' crazy high-flying offense, we saw the slow, meticulous strategy from FTR, we saw both teams let their emotions get the better of them, we witnessed each team paint a picture of what they envisioned tag team wrestling should be, all through their in-ring maneuvers. At one point, Dax and Cash hit an elevated bulldog, a move the Steiner brothers went to all the time, as well as the Heart Attack, a tag maneuver out of the Hart Foundation's playbook. FTR, simply through their choice of offense, was illustrating the type of wrestlers they grew up watching, the teams they idolized, the era they represent. Fittingly, Matt and Nick responded by hitting the 3D, then the Twist of Fate, and the Swanton Bomb, paying homage to the Dudley Boys and the Hardy Boys, the teams the Bucks have been influenced by the most, the offense they admired as kids wrestling on trampolines in the backyard.
You can see the generations that inspired both of these wrestlers. The Young Bucks invoking the Hardys, the Dudleys, FTR, the Hart Foundation, the Steiner brothers.
There was a nail-biting moment towards the end where Matt Jackson is so angry at Dax Harwood that he struggles to keep himself from just wailing away at him with a chair, which would disqualify the Bucks and blow their final shot at the tag titles. The history between the teams is so far-reaching and so personal that both teams simply can't maintain their composure. Which brings us to the finish. Nick Jackson is indisposed, Matt Jackson is injured, he can't really put weight on his left ankle, and for all intents and purposes, Cash Wheeler can now grab the win for his team. But in a final act of defiance, he abandons his game plan. He simply can't resist winning this match by putting away the Bucks with their own offense and by trying a 450 splash of his own. And his ego costs him. Look, I'll be the first to admit that this video went way off the rails of where my work usually goes, but damn it, this is a topic that I love. Storytelling in any art form doesn't always need to be explicit. Sometimes those things left unsaid, and that which is read between the lines or between the ropes, is one of the finest ways to make people feel things. As much as I wanted to find one, I don't really have a video game equivalent to the Bucks and FTR, but I would love it if you did. So let me know in the comments below your magnum opus of a video game telling a story through its battle system. I can't tell you how much fun I had making this video and watching this match live the night it happened. Matches like this make me proud to be a pro wrestling fan, and sharing this with you in the context of gaming gets me excited for all the possibilities and all the gripping stories that are yet to be told in the ring and in our next big adventure. Well, folks, that wraps up year 3 of Daryl Talks Games, Cycle of Play, this whole big crazy endeavor that I started January in 2017. And here we are, 3 years later. Things are very different now. Is it 2017? No, I'm doing the math. 20 to 21. It's about to be 21. Okay, I'm very tired. I've been editing for the past 48 hours. Guys, this has been just top to bottom a spectacular ride. 2020, as you well know, was full with all kinds of uncanny bullshit, and honestly, the way my channel grew this year was similar to that, except it just happened to be good luck instead of bad luck. This is a year of incredible highs and incredible lows and nowhere in the middle, and I think we can all relate to that. I just want to say genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for consistently tuning in, watching my videos. This year, so many things happened. We hit the 100. We hit the 100,000, and I got this in the mail, and that was surreal because I remember this time 3 years ago, I was just watching other YouTube channels and thinking, oh my gosh, 100,000, that's so many, and now here we are. And I had a video hit 1 million views this year, 2 million actually. It's working on 3, the fourth wall video. Thank you for that. If you watched that and you're here because of that, can't thank you enough. Thank you, YouTube algorithm. Shout out to the YouTube algorithm for really making that thing happen. But guys, as you know, it's been an incredible year, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of it. As for what's next, I'm going to take a break next. Going to take about 2 weeks off and just kind of reset my batteries, enjoy my time with my family, and just kind of enjoy the holidays as best I can. But when I get back, 2021, we're hitting the ground rolling. We're talking Hollow Knight again. We're talking personality. You guys have been wanting personality and how that affects gaming. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other stuff. I have another video that I've kind of, I won't spoil anything, but there's going to be some good stuff next year. The 2020 lineup, the 2021 lineup next year is going to be just fantastic, and I'm very excited to share it with all of you, and I hope you're just as excited as I am. Before I go, I do want to send a huge thank you to all of my Patreon backers. You guys are the backbone. You guys are the heartbeat. Whatever analogy you can come up with, you guys are that for this channel. And I can't thank you enough for supporting me and for believing in me and choosing to spend money on me every month. That's actually still hard to wrap my mind around. And speaking of Patreon, I want to give I can't talk. Talking is hard. As always, if you'd like to join the Patreon community and have your name scrolling on screen, as you can see here, Daryl put it somewhere on the screen. If you'd like to be on screen with these folks, then please check out my Patreon. I'll have a link on the screen in just a minute. And also, we have featured patrons this month. The featured patrons this month are Daniel Tyfert, Tiago Nascimento, Sebastian, Etra Games, that's my boy right there. Etra Games makes a fantastic video essays. Highly recommend checking him out. Alex the Bear, Matthew Hill, KTK Trap House, and Courtney Sarton. Guys, it has been an incredible year, and I think nothing but good things are going to come next year with any luck. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be out of here. I'm going to go rest now. I'm going to shower because I don't really smell too good after all that not showering. Take care of yourselves, guys. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. Just please enjoy it. Enjoy your time with your families. Enjoy your time with your friends. And as always, guys, have yourself a damn good one.